But it's sort of a different thing we're seeing right now in our work with real estate, which is not actually the quest for the new single technology that is the answer to all our questions, but a challenge where technology becomes pervasive in everything we do in real estate or in the way property is used, and that poses a different challenge. So I'll go through, I hope quite quickly, a very quick run through of where technology plays a part right now and why technology is being used, with examples from clients around the world. So they're all things that are being either planned or built as we speak. And then the second half flips into some of the questions how to deal with technology, which I think is changing and that also needs to be addressed. It's quite detailed, so my marketing team was not happy with this at all, because they thought there's too much material in there and slides should only have 3 bullets and 2 pictures. But I think for these workshop type settings, you can go a bit more meat on the bone and make your work a bit harder. So I hope that's okay. As I said, my job in Arup is a global business leader. I do 3 things. We do the sort of strategic key account engagements. So I work with our biggest clients in property and cities primarily, a little bit of transport and sport. We do our foresight and leadership work and research into topics around digital built environment in my space, and we help each of our countries around the world setting up their own teams. And the main area I'm focusing right now is our new cloud analytics and visualization work. So in terms of property, I'll come back to this later. We have sort of scales in this brief thing. We set one level, what happens at a building level. The second one, what happens at an estate or portfolio level, and then increasingly for the world of property is the relationship between the building or the portfolio and the district and the city it's surrounded in. So the converging of thinking around transport and mobility can't just happen around the boundary of your building. You need to understand journey patterns and issues more broadly. A retail strategy in the US we're working on right now for 22 blocks. The public realm design and the public realm experience is as big an issue as the individual building or retail experience. An office campus we talked about last night in Mountain View on Sunnyvale with 40,000 people is as much about the urban and the district experience as what happens in the building or the campus you control. So that poses some questions because these boundaries of the city are not under your control as a corporate entity. So the first example starts at that level, district scale. This is a client who looked at an estate of about 300,000 people they wanted to think about, and the premise was that we're not going to have individual car ownership, we're going to have completely different experience around mobility. So all journeys are booked in real time, cars are shared. The public realm is therefore completely designed and optimized for pedestrian cycling and cars intermingling with each other. With that, you get a completely different landscape of building facades because you don't have the noise and the air pollution from the cars coming. So these are real studies now being done where people want to conceive a different way of an experience on the edge, on the outside of the building, or journey and transport patterns that are no longer built around individual car journey and car ownership. And we think that's not going to go away. I think this is sort of a trend that stays with us. And if I go down the scale to the building or block level, this is White Collar Factory, Derwent in London, around sort of a different experience for the individual in the building to interact with both the building and the services available. And it's a combination of, we talked about earlier, IoT and systems going in, but also the design of apps or new interfaces on how employees interact with the building itself. Down to, this is a client in Germany, where what you don't see on this desk are any wires or cables at all, no electrical wires, no data wires. The entire premise is that the desk would be completely battery driven around direct current with internet being provided by Wi-Fi. Now, that's not going to happen tomorrow. This is probably a bit further out, but the role of technology in changing the desktop again and the way we work with the desktop and the emergence of the Internet of Things to instrument and measure everything at a desk is quite interesting. Which leads to the idea of infrastructure as a service, because at that point you might actually just lease all these assets rather than buy them from somebody. Or if you take that to another concept, Schindler rolling out their lift program, where every lift globally is now instrumented and measured. We are not far away then from saying instead of buying lifts, you basically pay for how many people are moving up and down in high-rise or super high-rise buildings. The same way as, you know, Rolls-Royce is no longer selling engines, but paying for how many minutes planes are in the air. And then it continues. This is a real estate portfolio in the Middle East, and this is a real estate portfolio again on the West Coast, where we are capturing all data, organize it spatially. So this is sort of a mapping and geospatial framework with an analytics tool in the background to be able in real time to see for any asset, any attribute, and any data that is relevant to that asset at an estate level or at a desk level. And that attribute can be cost, that can be energy, that can be shading, that can be trees, that can be journey patterns of individuals. So this is a new control room. Gone a bit overboard, I think, with design. You could probably build a control room for half the price and have the same functionality in it. But the interesting bit is the front end here is all around an analytics framework for the real estate organization to look at all relevant data of the organization in real time. This is a graph we used, we touched on it last night, construction industry productivity gains over the last 40 years, which is unfortunately not pointing in the right direction. And the comparison was with the aerospace industry or manufacturing industry, and it's linked to the deployment of BIM and geospatial parametric design tools and supply chain management, supply chain optimization, which in the design and construction process itself must deliver a 20-30% efficiency gain. I think Mark Buren in the BIM task force and now Digitally Build Britain has done plenty of work in that, and we see this playing out all over the world. In Arup, we're now we're setting up measures and guidelines and standards for every project at any time, anywhere in the world, having to aspire to an expectation we set around design efficiencies with these tools. So that's about 10, 14,000 projects at any point in time that now have to use these tools to drive efficiency, not just in what we design, but in how we design it. This is a few years ago. I hope the name is not readable, because it's not necessarily a good story. A corporate real estate portfolio of about, at the time, 6.5 billion in real estate. And when we started to look at the way data was organized in their property and asset management and customer relationship systems, it was just appalling. So this building would be called Building A in one system, it would be called Building 1, 2, 3 in another, and it would be called something else over there. So we try to optimize, so as a result, the leasing process took 6 months. Yeah? Agents, sub-agents, tenants, agents, architects, contractors, until they were all aligned, just to know which property we're looking at, legally binding boundary information, updates on facilities management, was a 6 months process. Only because the information was shared via email and clipboards and walkie-talkies. You know, ridiculous really in today's age. They wanted to roll out a customer relationship management program, and I said, well, 6.5 billion of assets, hundreds of sub-tenancies, what are you going to do that? By calling them all the time? By setting up banks of call centers or customer relationship managers? So you need to have a different data architecture to run your portfolio in real time. And the property industry is also not helped by the IT industry in that sense, that the big vendors, Manhattan, Trariga, etc., are all siloed, highly fragmented systems. So this is ripe for quite a rapid change, which I think will come from the clients, not from the IT industry. The IT industry always like to sell proprietary, old school technology until somebody says that it's no longer acceptable. And so what we're now seeing though, the point I wanted to make was, this is all about outcomes. Yeah, this was all about driving a different experience, saving time and money in construction and design, improving the real-time management of a portfolio, a different experience in the building, infrastructure as a service, or more agile use of facilities in the building. These are all outcomes that people are linking to technology. But the answer to that isn't this sort of single bullet, I need an app or I need technology. It's a sort of combination of process data and systems in a whole range of areas. So I will unpack this now for you to nail that point hopefully a bit more. So I'll bring you back to simplifying this, building a state, city. And if I put underneath a method we used originally in our smart cities work, where we talk about the level of ambition and sophistication people try to achieve with technology. So here, level 1, people still do more advanced technology for one outcome. So we try to solve one dot with the technology intervention and make that better. And over here are the clients, and there's a brilliant book written about it, which is a very unfortunate title for it, called The Second Machine Age. But what they talk about is combinatorial thinking. You know, the ability to connect several things you want to change through technology in your organization and with external partners is the real new game in town around technology use. And let me now explain this through some examples. So this is the traditional view of back office and front office we talked about earlier, and you have rent accounting, community services, transport and mobility, health and well-being, customer relationships, estate planning, marketing and PR, and the silos look different in different companies, but the silos are not going away. You need to organize and manage somehow. And then technology is organized around asset management within silos, or movement and transport planning, and maybe occupancy management, tenant and occupier relationship, a website, portfolio dashboards, and finance. And what people really want to get to is operate data across the entire portfolio and the entire estate. Or, and with this data architecture to say, and I think what people really want to focus on is occupancy management. Knowing who's in your building when and how they're using it is probably the starting point for driving efficiency around energy and all sorts of things. But not knowing who's in your building where and when makes it quite hard, because you're just walking around the clipboards once a year, assuming who's where and how they're feeling about it. So if you could start at marginal cost, draw in occupancy data from your different systems, that would be quite an interesting prospect around an estate. But to do that, this is actually what the world looks like, I think, for a lot of organizations. So this is a real estate portfolio, about 120 buildings, and we did a mapping exercise of every system, every piece of technology, whether it's a building management or a camera or rent accounting or a CRM system. And when we asked the real estate organizations which technologies they were sort of involved with, it was a little bit of head-end BMS systems. It was something around cameras and security for an access control. Connectivity always is an issue nowadays. A bit of rent accounting and property, a bit of ERP, and a whole array of metering because of the recent focus on energy and water and a resilience argument. When we, so that's sort of at this level here, yeah, level 1, 2, 3 or 4 systems individually, and that was already seen as complicated. When we compared that with a study we've done recently for a big American tech firm, where we said, across any of these systems in your building, which one will have a digital interface? Which one will become part of your digital fabric in the sense that it could export data at marginal cost to you? We found another 38 systems in the building, from irrigation and lighting and lifts and where at reasonably marginal cost we could extract data to run the building in real time or more effectively. But that combinatorial approach to look much more consistently across technology is at this level here, and it's a challenge for property to get their head around. And one of the challenges is that data is impossible to organize on a computer on an Excel spreadsheet. So the introduction of cloud and a new framework around data analysis and what we call insight is absolutely heart of a future real estate management organization. And there are not many who right now have that in place. I think Microsoft is quite interesting. Daryl Smith, when he ran 88 Acres built a very interesting stack around Azure and Iconics and Power BI. I don't know how technical you are, stuff that is completely cloud-based. That would allow him to capture real-time data across Microsoft's real estate portfolio globally. Now he was able to do that because Microsoft wants to promote their cloud solutions everywhere. So he had free access to resource what's usually not available in a real estate organization. But this will be a cornerstone, I think, of future digital strategies in real estate. And the reason is that this is really technical and a bit boring. But basically what this says is sensors in the future and actuators will produce data in real time all the time. And that is just the way it is. So where is that data going to go? It is not going to go into your head end or 20 different databases or SQL servers across the estate. That data will end up in an orchestrated cloud environment, and it will be hugely, hugely valuable to have. And the biggest one right now, I think, to focus on is not necessarily energy. So energy is important. It's actually video, which is killer in terms of content, but with the new emergence of video analytics, it is also the most powerful data set available around understanding occupancy and behaviors and patterns. So we can now predict whether there are 10 or 5 people in this room. We can predict whether they're sitting or standing. We can see whether they're having an argument or whether they are relatively happily sitting together. It will happen first in retail and in airports, for example, where we're already seeing this being trialed quite aggressively, but I can't see this not happening in commercial office space too. And then you have this issue of the city and the externalities. So this is WS Development, a developer in Boston with 22 blocks under construction. So it's a big old site. They're knocking out a $2 billion capital program. And when we when we asked them, who in Boston do you need to share data with if you want to do transport differently? Who in Boston do you need to work with if you want to have footfall data that starts at origin and not just at the boundary of your site? Who in Boston do you need to agree with your new parking and access strategy to the site? They said, don't really know. Yeah. Who do you going to have a deal with around 5G and cellular coverage on your estate? So we mapped for the first time all the external parties that need to be part of what we call a digital ecosystem, that you need to have a formal agreement with if you want to drive an estate of this size in a more modern way. So people then say, oh, this all sounds a bit complicated, how are we going to pay for that? And money is the barrier, and it's unaffordable. And we're not sure that is actually the right question. So it is always the right question, money matters, and you have to pay for things, but it's not necessarily the main barrier. Because what we currently found is the ICT budget, whether it's the ICT budget of the real estate organization or the ICT budget of your company, is completely separate from the capital, the development and the operating budgets, and even those are often separate. So when you have big development pipelines, the money you spend here is significantly higher than the money there. And actually, a first massive efficiency can be found by drawing a connection between the investment in technology that happens across your estate. 2-3% uplift in capital around technology investment instruments your entire estate to a level where here you could do completely different things as a result. But these are not planned as one initiative. So what we're now seeing people looking around this and saying we need a vision and a leadership approach around IT and cloud, capital and operating and maintenance budgets, and where we work with external partners into one financial framework. And then you might need some new money to tie things together, but it's not an entire new budget to pay for the whole thing. And the barrier to that isn't, therefore, the technology or the money. I think the barrier to that is often that at this level of combinatorial thinking or integration, the need for strategy planning is very different from the need for just operating and managing. So what we see companies now flipping around and say, we real estate and IT are together responsible for strategy and planning, put in place some strong management around contract and service management, and then outsource a lot of delivery to people who want to do tech delivery. Where currently we see it often being done the other way around. A lot of time being spent on setting up cameras and operators and security systems down here, and very little effort being spent here. So this London real estate organization I showed earlier, instead of, I mean, for us it was unfortunate in a way, because we thought we were earning a lot of money down here. Instead, we had a seat on the management board for 18 months, reorganizing the visioning and the strategy up here, which is interesting too. It's just not having the same yield as a consulting business. But again, you can't swim against the current. You know, you've got to go with the trends. This I will fly through quickly. This is sort of a summary of the issues therefore people face. To operate at this level here, there is a technological question around what technology and how you integrate. But the issues that also have to be addressed is how you measure value across a system and not just for individual projects. What's your governance and leadership strategy? What's your strategic focus? What are your aspirations over time? How does it align with the aspiration of your CIO or Chief Digital Officers? And how do you then measure and engage with the individual employee or the user of the technology to track that it's really better in what's in the field? So a lot of property technology programs we look at drive ahead on the technology side, and I'm not really trying to address this issue at the same time. So wrapping up, we think the market now segments into people that think at these scales, and then at these scales they either try to run, so they're just trying to do business as usual, maybe a little bit better. They try to grow, so this is one or two things they want to improve, or they look at a sort of transformation agenda that somewhere between portfolio and estate level sets a new vision around technology. And the main why is they want to drive brand and asset value. You know, this morning we'll talk about Canary Wharf. Clearly, that was the driver. Boston Seaport, Google, Microsoft are in that space. They all want to drive the experience, what we talked about this morning. They still want to get all the efficiency gains. Don't get me wrong. They all want the operational efficiency gains, and they're looking explicitly at future proofing and planning. And to do so, in addition to just looking at technology, they usually look at vision and leadership, organization, technology, and money, and then execution planning, particularly if it's global portfolios, where it's not trivial to execute a new strategy with lots of buildings. And that was all I had to say.
Wow.
Thank you.